What's going on, everybody? All right, this is Monday, and this is not just any Monday. This is Monday of my spring break. I have the week off. Now, we've had a bunch of storms going through California right now, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, but you know, I'm the weather may not be perfect. That's okay. You know, it might not be sunny outside. That's okay. I'm on spring break. Now, before you start going, oh man, I'm so jealous, I do have surgery on Wednesday. So, yeah, I have a week off, but I do have a surgery. It's not a big deal, although I tend to have I don't know, I'm on about my 11th or 12th surgery of my life. I'm a complete disaster, but this is a small one. I think I'm on like my third hernia they're going to repair. So later in the week, I don't think it's going to affect my schedule. Should be fine. Schedule should be normal. Wednesday should be good. A video Friday, maybe even a video Saturday. We'll see. But if the schedule, if something gets missed this week, it's just because I was laid up. A week from today, a week from right now, is MidLife Live number 3. And my panel is fantastic. My topic, I think, is going to be very interesting. At the end of this video, the very end, stay until the end, because at the end of this video, I will be sharing the panel and I will be talking about the topic that we'll be going over. It's going to be fun. Again, mark your calendars. Next Monday, March 24th, and it's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be a lot of fun. The first turnouts for January and February, remember I'm doing one of these a month, January and February absolutely blew my expectations, my hopes, my wildest dreams, all of that. It surpassed all of it. So let's keep this momentum going. If you can make it out, awesome. And if you do, participate in that chat. There's definitely going to be a section in there where you can throw out your comments, thoughts, questions, ideas to this panel. And this is a panel I'm very, very excited about because these guys definitely have strong opinions. It's going to be fun. Before we go into a review of last week's question, which we're here to talk about today, which is what's the best hobby advice you could give someone, I have a couple of quick gifts. Now, my good friend, Christopher, from the great state of Missouri, a.k.a. Chris from Missouri, he sent me a nice little care package. Such a great guy. I am super excited to see you, my friend, here in just over 3 weeks. First, he sent me a 53 tops early win. Look at that beauty. Is there a set that's more beautiful than the 53 top set? It's definitely in the conversation. Gorgeous card. Absolutely love that. Then he sent me a Tony Oliva rookie. Beautiful 64 tops. I for some reason, that 64 top set, it just really jumps to me. It's so clean. It's simple, but it's so clean and it's just so crisp. I really like that 64 set. And then he sent me my guy Matt Manning. This is his Bowman Chrome True Rookie Auto. This one's out of 150. Beautiful color match on that, the blue. Chris, you are not just a pretty face. You are also a really good guy. And then my guy, John. John reached out to me and he said, hey, can I get your address? I was like, sure. He goes, I want to send you something. He sent me something I'm really excited about, which is one of the Matt Manning Topps Chrome. And this is I think this is a Sepia Ray Wave, I think is what this one is called. I didn't have it. So I wouldn't say I'm building the run. Remember, this is the one I got the superfractor of. I wouldn't say I'm building a rainbow, a full build, but I mean, if I see some that I don't have, then I'll pick them up. And I didn't have this one. So John, fantastic. Really appreciate you thinking of me and sending this on over. So again, Last week's question to all of you was, what is the one piece of hobby advice you would give to fellow collectors? And there were lots of great responses, as always. Let's take a look at the first series of responses that had a similar theme to them right here. First piece of advice, don't be in a rush. Be patient. My good buddy Orlando says, great conversation, Greg. Thanks for having me on. Next week's question, patience in collecting is critical. Getting the right card for you. Another one says, great video, Greg. The answer to your question for next week, instead of or in addition to buying the card, not the grade, and collect what you like advice, I would give fellow collectors is to be patient. The deals are out there. Don't buy a card unless it is the one that fits your eye and your budget. And by the way, Greg, you are a young guy to me. I've got 10 years on you. And finally, my good friend Don says, another great interview, Greg. I always enjoy listening to Orlando's thoughts on the hobby. As for next week's question, patience, patience, patience. And concentrate on the rare cards in your wheelhouse. You will always be able to find the mainstream cards. Study pop reports. They are the best thing the grading companies ever did for the hobby. Thanks. Okay, the one of the things I feel that today's youth tends to overlook is wisdom and experience and being open-minded and asking for advice. It's like people come out of the womb and think they already know everything. And I mean, we all have opinions. I've got lots of opinions. You guys know I am full of opinions and possibly other stuff. But the thing that I do enjoy doing is sitting around with people who are older than me, who have been around the block, who have lived life, and asking them questions, getting advice. I've got several people I ask advice of. I used to love talking to my grandpas and asking them different questions about how they did things and why they did things to learn. My uncle, who passed away a few years ago, whenever I'd see him, I would ask him, he'd tell me stories about, like growing up and experiences he had. And I absolutely love that stuff. And in the 3 responses that I just read, I've got 2 people in there that are incredible collectors, lifelong card collectors. One, obviously, Orlando, and then my buddy Don, who I got to meet at Strongsville last year. I got to spend time with him at the National last year. We interact, and they both said it's all about patience. Now, these are guys who probably have both been collecting longer than I've been alive. I mean, I was born in 79. So they each have been collecting. I mean, between these 3 responses that all said patience. And by the way, there were other responses that also said patience. I just pulled 3 of them. But just these 3 probably have over 100 years combined of card collecting experience. And they say patience. It is very, very difficult to stay patient. When I remember when I first had kids, when I first bought a house, and when I first bought a car, and I'm just like, how am I ever going to pay for everything and pay these things off? And how am I ever going to build my retirement account and get to the point where someday I might have enough money to be able to retire? How am I ever going to do that? And the problem is, I think the younger we are, the more we look at things of, it's like maybe if you're 20, 2 years is like 10% of your life. So you're like, 2 years, that's a really long time. Where once you start to get older, like me right now, it feels like I just started this last school year and we just finished the 3rd quarter. We have 1 quarter left. It literally feels like we just started the school year. time flies. And as you get older, it does feel like the years just fly by faster. And I think that we have to just keep in mind that this is a marathon. You cannot run a marathon by sprinting all the way through it. You have to run a marathon one step at a time. I remember back in elementary school, and it would be like mile day, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to run a mile. But if you just break it up, if you just go, let's just run to that curve. Let's run through this straightaway to that curve. Then we'll worry about everything else after that. Okay, now let's run the curve and get to the next straightaway, and then we'll worry about the rest after that. If you just break things up, then you kind of before you know it, you're at the finish line. And it's the same thing with if you want to build an amazing collection can't happen overnight. You can buy a bunch of cards overnight. If you want to spend a lot of money and build a bunch of cards overnight, you can absolutely do that overnight. It would be very expensive, and I don't know how enjoyable that would actually be. Whenever I can remember purchasing a card, the cards where you remember buying them, right? The cards where you remember finding it on eBay, or you're bidding on the auction, or you set a snipe and hope to get it. The times where you're at a show and you see it and you remember the negotiations, aren't those cards more special? The cards that mean the most are the ones you waited and you waited and you waited and you waited, and then you found the right one, and then you made the deal happen, and now you have it. If you just go out and buy the first one you see of every card, that's not very memorable. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of cards out there that look fairly similar. But the thing that makes each purchase, each card, the thing that makes each card so special in your collection, when you look through it and you just go, oh man, yeah, that one, this one, and there's a story to go with it. Any card in your collection where there's a story to go with it, specifically how you obtained it, those are the most special cards in your collection. That's why when you go to a big show, if you go to the National, get a fairly big card. And my buddy Chris from Missouri, speaking of, he says that all the time. When I go to a big show, I want to get kind of a big card, as that's like my Strongsville card. Like last year, my Strongsville card was my 49 Leaf Warren Spawn. My National card, even though I got a Walter Johnson T206, I'll always think of the 2024 National as my Ernie Banks card, because I longed for that card for so long. I waited and waited and waited. And that is when I crossed the finish line and actually added it to the collection. The Walter Johnson, don't get me wrong, I love that card. But I only wanted that card for a year or so before I got it. The Spawn I wanted for a long time, years. The Banks, decades. When you take your time, it makes it more meaningful. It makes it more meaningful, and I think it's really good advice. And I think that we all have to sometimes take a step back and listen to that advice and utilize it. Some people said focus on what matters most, the people. Matt over at Straight Race Cards says, loved Orlando's last comment about finding stuff at the right price. I'm not very good at that, but slowly learning and getting better day by day. Great conversation, guys. To answer your question, Greg, I would tell other collectors that while cards are fun and enjoyable, people are the most important part of the hobby. It's been so fun connecting with other collectors over the last 5 years since I got back in the hobby. My life has been way more enriched by great relationships with some amazing collectors than any satisfaction a card could ever bring me. I'd encourage others to prioritize card community over anything else. And my good buddy Brent Richards in Baseball Cards says, great stuff. Awesome to have Orlando on with you to do this. Next week's answer, put yourself out there and make hobby friends, period. Get in the comments, chats, do a channel, go to shows, whatever you feel comfortable with, but just do it. Once you have great hobby friends, your life will change for the better, and the cards will become almost secondary. Collecting cards is great. It's nostalgic, it's historic, it's strategic, it's all of those things. The reason we like it is because, well, there's too many reasons to list. And I've said this before, I've mentioned this many times, that most of us that are card collectors, most people who have hobbies, like where they're really into their hobby. You know, you think of, fishermen and hunters and, card collectors or photographers or bird watchers or whatever the hobby is, hikers. Most of those things and most of those people tend to be kind of introverted. See, the hobby for extroverts is spending time with people. Like my wife gets so excited when there's some sort of gathering, family gathering or a friend gathering or birthday party. She's just so excited. She is very much like Tigger and is just full of energy and excitement. And then there are those that are wired like me. And I know, again, I'll say this again, I know this seems ridiculous because, I appear to be very outgoing and gregarious, but I'm very introverted. So for years and years and years, one of the things I really enjoyed about card collecting is I could go to a show, I could be left alone, and I could just go and dig through cards and look and observe and strategize and negotiate. That was a lot of the fun. And then finally, after, 35 years of collecting, I started this. And when I started this, I thought that the connection was going to be with people who watched videos. My goal was create this community of people where we connect and we leave comments and we respond and back and forth. That was what I thought was going to happen. I had absolutely no idea that I would become really good friends with these other people. I had no idea. Now, some of the people I've become really good friends with are, people who make videos. Some of them aren't. Some of them I've talked into making videos. Some of them are people who I connect with and we communicate, and it's not in person. It's a game changer. It is an absolute game changer. And I am literally a person who dreads going to birthday parties or staff functions. Oh my gosh, staff functions. Like if there's like a staff, I've never been to a staff Christmas party. I don't go to work gatherings. That's not my thing. I am not about that. And last year, I wasn't going to go to Strongsville. In fact, a year ago right now, I wasn't even going to go. I wasn't even going to go to Strongsville. It was like a week and a half, 2 weeks before Strongsville last year that I kind of just said, maybe I should go. And then I went. A couple of people kind of encouraged me to do it. My wife encouraged me to do it. My dad encouraged me to do it. A couple of other people encouraged me to do it. I'm like, all right, let's do this. This does not sound like something that is a good fit for my personality. But then I went and I came home And I was so glad I went. I was so glad I went. I had these people that I was friends with. And by the time the weekend was over, they were like family. And it just changed everything. I would encourage everybody to connect with fellow collectors and enjoy the hobby together. Because I used to think it was all about the cards. And what I've come to realize is actually the cards are the medium that allow us to connect with new friends. Some said have focus and strategy. This first one says answer for next week. Have a better plan than building a big collection as fast as you can. For those getting into it, accumulating can be addictive, so that pretty soon you have 3, 4, 5 packages in the mail every day. And that does feel good, but you don't even have time to appreciate your purchases for more than a few seconds before it goes in a box and you're back on eBay running searches. Aside from the financial problems this can cause, your collection can get out of control in a hurry. The time will come when you have to put on the brakes and start selling. Sure, this is a great time to focus, consolidate, downsize, but you'll save anxiety and money if you can exercise discipline and self-restraint from the start. Have a plan before you start spending. My good friend Dave, and legendary collector, says great conversation between two of the most interesting people in the hobby. For next week's question, I have 2 thoughts. First, create a strategy and criteria for what you want to collect. This helps keep you focused. Even if you buy something that does not exactly meet your criteria, it makes that decision a conscious one rather than an emotional one. Secondly, have patience when you are looking for a specific card. If you wait long enough, it will surface. Don't compromise your goals for the sake of a quick fix. All right. When you're watching YouTube videos and you're going to card shows and you're seeing things you've never seen before. I mean, you go to a card show and you walk along and you go, oh my gosh, what is that? That's amazing. I need that. And then you go around the corner and you see more things that you've never seen before and you say, I need that actually. And that is one of the things that happens at the National for sure. Now, another place that happens is on YouTube. I mean, I'm in Discords with guys. I'm on chat groups with guys. I watch lots of videos and people go, oh, here are my recent pickups. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to have that. And what happens is there are a lot of things I want to have. There are a lot of things I want to have. I could drive through my neighborhood and point out 5 houses that I really want. I could drive by the car dealerships in town and point out 10 vehicles which I'd really like to own. But I don't go out and buy them. I don't go out and buy all those other houses and all those other cars. I could admire them, but that's not part of my financial plan and my transportation plan and goals and my living situation. It's okay to admire a lot of things, but sometimes because there's so much cool stuff around us, we end up going in all these different directions. So if we can just stay focused, and it's hard to stay focused if you don't have a plan. See, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I'll tell you right now, I am absolutely guilty of this. I have bought several cards over the last year or two that aren't really in line with my collection. And in most cases, I end up selling them. See, I like spur of the moment purchases. That's fun. But the spur of the moment purchases should be a part of your strategy or part of your plan. Now, there are some people whose collections are so immense, right? John Mancini has an immense collection, just tons and tons of stuff that when he goes to a show and he sees something, he goes, whoa, what's that? I need that. I don't see that every day. That's kind of that's a different place in collecting than most of us live. Most of us live in a situation where we kind of collect, certain players or certain sets or certain eras or certain, teams or whatever it is. But then we see this other thing and I go, man, I need that. I recently, over the summer last year, in fact, right before the National, I made a couple of pretty significant purchases because I was like, that's too good of a thing to pass up. That is a really cool card. That is a really good price. I'm buying it. And then don't get me wrong, very cool cards. And the more time went by, I'm like, those don't really fit with what I do. What I do is I collect a handful of players, right? I really like, Greg Nettles, Roger Clemens, Matt Manning. I collect those guys. I really like collecting T206s. I'm not going to try to build the whole set of like 500 cards. I'm not going to do that. So the way I kind of narrowed it is I was like, well, I'm going to go after, get one card of all the Hall of Famers and potentially more than one card of all the Hall of Famers. But at least that keeps me focused by having, kind of taking this 500 card set and go bring it all the way down to like 60 cards or 100 cards or 80 cards or whatever it is. I collect Yankee captains, right? The Yankee captains of, his from the first one, Clark Griffith, to the current one, Aaron Judge. All of those guys, I collect those cards. I collect nostalgic cards, basically the cards that I grew up and I'd see the card and go, man, that would be amazing to have that. Those are kind of what I collect. There are times that I see something else and I go down that, deer trail, rabbit hole, whatever you want to call it. I do that all the time. But if you can have this kind of guiding philosophy, like my buddy Dave just said, and like he said when I interviewed him back a couple of months ago, he said he collects, the all-time greats from all-time great sets of cards he likes the looks of. And one example that he talked about was he had a Pete Rose rookie card. And he was like, yeah, I mean, I'm supposed to have a Pete Rose rookie card. It's Pete Rose's rookie card. It's an iconic card. I mean, he's an all-time great. You can make the argument that the 63 set is a really fairly important set. And then he's like, but I don't like the card. I don't like the looks of it for him. So he moved on from it. Whatever you like, whatever it is that you see, and whatever it is that you see your potential collection looking like, what are the parameters? Put parameters around. Fence it in, I live across the street from a massive cattle ranch. It's basically grazing land, and there's tons and tons of cattle out there. And when I hear those cows mooing, there is a perimeter. You may not see it. Some people's perimeter might be huge. Some people's perimeter might be small. It just kind of depends on what you set the parameters are. But whatever your parameters are, set that perimeter fencing out there and then live within it. Because otherwise you're going to end up with this hodgepodge of stuff that you'll never really accomplish whatever it is you'd like your collection to eventually be. I think it's fantastic advice. And again, we're talking to a lot of what we're hearing from here are longtime collectors with incredible collections. And trust me, I am absolutely listening to what they have to say. And yes, there were some other thoughts and advice. My buddy Dylan of Double D Vintage Baseball Cards says, "This was the best conversation I have heard all year. I consider Orlando as a mentor and one of the smartest collectors I know. When he speaks, I listen." Okay, to the question. My number one piece of advice to myself is, don't be afraid to spend more on a certain card than anyone ever has. I go with my eyes and my gut, not comps. I did this 24-ish years ago and got a bit scared to hold on to my big ones. If I never got scared and held my collection with an iron fist, I would have a multi-million-dollar collection today. I was happy I held enough to have the collection I do, but I learned a lesson. History has taught me to be strong, not scared, and stay the course. My guy Larry says, my recommendation for collectors is when going to a show, of course, have some cards in mind that you want to obtain. But the most fun is buying something at the show that you never expected. I have been to the National maybe 15 times, and the only time I had a list was when I was putting together a set. Otherwise, I just shopped and usually came home with something special that never crossed my mind and was thrilled to add to my collection. My friend Mitch says, for next week's question, advice from a wise old guy that I often tell younger collectors when I do shows is that vintage is the foundation of the hobby. Build a strong foundation in your collection with vintage. And my dad gives the strong advice of only buy what you can really afford. Another comment says, advice for other collectors? Hype has no long-term value. Don't pay extra for it. And finally, my good friend Adam of a Vintage Sanctuary says, hi Greg, wonderful epic-sode with the perfect guest in Orlando. To your question, my advice to fellow collectors would be to keep their hobby in perspective so that faith, family, work, health, financial budget, and other aspects of life are given their proper due. Also, make plans to get at least one big card per year by trading, selling, saving, whatever big means for your current circumstances. Plus, get plugged into this wonderful collecting community, even finding a best friend. His name will probably be Scott. Feel free to change directions in your collecting. Most everyone will support you in that, and those who don't, wish them the best. When you come to a fork in your collecting journey, don't forget to collect Yogi Berra. You forgot already? How could you? Oh, and keep your YouTube comments short. Bonus advice. Get mentors. Shane, Shoebox Legends, and Dylan, Double D Vintage Baseball, have both helped me immensely, as have many others. All right. That was a great series of a wide variety of other things that I felt were worthy of sharing and mentioning. I mean, most of the people who chimed in this week are long-time collectors. You know, Dylan, my dad, Larry, these guys have been around for a long time. They've been collecting cards for a long time. And again, with experience comes wisdom. And with that wisdom, you know, it's like your kid's not going to know that when you touch a hot stove, it hurts unless they touch a hot stove. But we're not going to take their hand and press it onto the hot stove just to prove it to them. We'd prefer to help them avoid it. We want to help people avoid making mistakes that we've made or we've seen other people make. And that's the whole point of this episode, is sharing wisdom and experiences. You know, Dylan makes a great point. If we get so stuck on comps that we don't buy the right card for us because the number at the top of the slab says 3, but they're charging a little bit more than what that's ever sold for? Well, what if it's a 3 that could have been a 5? Because we've seen cards get resubmitted and that happen. So don't be afraid of being the new comp. Everyone who buys a house in my neighborhood sets the new all-time high whenever they buy the house. Why would that be different with cards? Especially if it's the nicest card in that grade that you've ever seen. My dad, his advice, only buy what you can actually afford. It's really, really easy to get carried away. I mean, some of my closest friends in this hobby have collections right now. Most of my friends in the hobby have collections right now that are better than what my collection will ever come to. And so what that does is it doesn't create competition. It doesn't create envy. It creates a situation where like, well, I really, really want that too. I mean, I remember being a newlywed and looking at how my parents and my friends' parents had nice cars and we're going on vacations and we're going out to eat. And I'm like, man, that would be nice. I'm not there yet. Why am I comparing myself to these other people who took a long time to get to that point? We have to ultimately look at what is important to us in our collection. I think if friends aren't an important part of this hobby to you, I really think you should reevaluate. I really think if you're in a rush to race through this hobby and just buy without actually enjoying it, I think you're making a mistake. I think if you're just buying random stuff whenever you walk by something cool and picking it up and throwing it in your cart, I think you're making a mistake. Strategy and patience and friendships are some of the most rewarding parts of the whole hobby. Now, here I am sharing my thoughts. Doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean they're right. What I am doing is I had a lot of people submit a lot of advice, and these are the things that rang true to me. These are the things that slapped me and knocked me upside the head. I was like, yeah, I'm going to pick that one. These may not apply to you. Some of these might not apply to you at all, but they certainly applied to me, and they stood out to me. And if they don't stand out to you, that's cool. That's cool too. There are lots of longtime collectors and dealers and people in the hobby. And instead of just walking by a dealer's table, strike up a conversation. Ask them about certain cards. Ask them about certain releases. Because you might pick some new things up. It might change your opinion on some things. I never would have thought I would be a collector of some of the M101 cards a few years ago. But I really like those now. And the more I learn about them, the more I like them. Same with the T206 cards. Same with a lot of the stuff that I've added to my collection. And the last thing I'll say before I get into next week's question is there isn't a right or a wrong way to do this. If you don't want to be patient, you don't have to. If you don't want to have a strategy, that's fine. If you want to do this by yourself and not add, friends, hobby friends into the mix, that's okay too. Whatever you decide to do is your prerogative. But these are things that people brought forward that they felt were important, that for me caught my attention. And when they caught my attention, I'm like, this is something that I think is worth sharing. That's not to say that some of the ones I didn't share aren't worth sharing, but I'm trying to keep these episodes under 3 hours long. I hope that you enjoyed the advice. I know I got a lot out of this. Now, for this coming week's question. Here is what I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. With everything happening with grading, is it time to trade down in grade? You know, for a long, long time, it was, you want high grade stuff. And a lot of people still are about high grade stuff. And look, we all want cards that we think look nice. And some of those cards are cards with high grades on them. But sometimes they're cards that aren't. Sometimes there's cards that don't have high grades that also meet our eye. So that's my question. Moving forward with everything happening with grading, what are your thoughts on how to adjust? With changes in grading and the impact of grading, how do you adjust? And is something that you've ever considered doing or thought about doing moving down in grade? So that's my question for this upcoming week. And 1 week from tonight is going to be MidLife Live number 3, where we're going to talk about exactly this. So we're going to be talking about grading. We're going to be talking about the importance of grades. We're going to be talking about the role of grading in the hobby. We're going to talk about our thoughts on grading. So who's going to be there with me? Again, it's always going to be me and hopefully 3 other people. So who are the 3 people on the panel for 1 week from tonight on March 24th, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific? Well, let's take a look right here.
All right. It is MidLife Live number 3. And what good is a MidLife Live without an awesome panel? And this one will not disappoint. Leading it off, we've got Dylan of Double D Vintage Baseball Cards.
I will go out on a limb right now as a collector and say grading is the best thing that ever happened to sports cards. I know this has been beaten with a dead horse a million times, talking about grading and why does it have such a hold over us. I think it is the greatest achievement in sports cards because for me, I've said this before, it was the great equalizer. Why are people not like us, or at least like me? Why are you not number blind yet? I love graded cards. Stop looking at that freaking number. In reality, I think, people can hate me for it, but I think grading was the greatest thing that ever happened to sports cards. How come we don't really genuinely don't look at the card and forget completely about the number?
But you know what PSA did? They suck. I just don't understand.
So I just think that the future is going to be a lot brighter for guys that use our own eyes. We use our own judgment. I think that legitimizes collecting, legitimizes our collections. I think a good looking 4 across the board, a dead center, great image with some rounded corners that cost you $100 now. I think the future holds much higher value for that card than an off-centered 7, an off-centered 8, or an off-centered 9.
Oh yeah, he's got opinions and he will share them. And joining him will be my guy Adam of Splendid Sports. He is a fantastic guest and he's got opinions on grading too.
I completely changed my mindset and I go after real high grades, 10s if I can. And I'm looking at his 10s and they're all 60-40 off-center. And I'm like, I like my 7 better, but this guy wins in the registry, right? He's got the better set. I think I said PSA 10s have peaked because that creates a chase for me. Otherwise, I could just go on eBay and every card that I want is raw. I could buy it, and if I wanted to grade it, I could. It will grade a 6 or a 7. But the chase and the fun for me comes in grading. Oh, this is the best because it's all 9s or all 10s. But you see the pictures and it's like, yeah, my 5 looks better than that. So yeah, in a certain way, I do collect slab. I've been selling some cards, and a lot of the cards are PSA 10s, or let's put it this way, cards that are only valuable because of the grade. You know, there's a lot of people say grading's a scam, and you know, and there's some validity to that. So I've been selling a lot of those and going a different direction with cards. But grading also, for me, has created a lot of fun. If it wasn't for grading, I don't know, I wouldn't have nearly as fun of a time collecting. I have had a lot of cards in my collection that are only valuable or collectible because of the PSA 10 or whatever the grade is. But the grade makes it valuable.
So how can we round this out? Who would be a great third? Well, this one won't disappoint either. How about someone with some strong opinions on grading? President John Mangini. These three will be joining us, and this is going to be a lot of fun.
Talk about grading. I know. You're sick of hearing about grading. So I posted an SGC authentic, minimum size not met, and a PSA 6.5. Right? The thing is, they were the exact same card. So somebody bought the authentic for $22,000 and I guess had it reordered on PSA. I'm guessing it got a 6.5. They gave it a grade and it is now on, I believe, REA, and it was over $118,000 at last check with many days left to go. Do we give grading companies too much control? Do we give the grading companies too much power over the value of our cards? Do we put too much faith in them? This proves that we no longer buy cards, we buy holders. Doesn't that make grading a scam? So who the hell is PSA to make up a rule about minimum size? PSA always ruins everybody's days. Thanks for hanging out with me. I gots to go.
This will be an absolute blast. 3 great collectors with strong opinions for MidLife Live number 3, and it will not disappoint.
Okay, what do you think? I mean, quite a panel, right? These guys tend to have opinions, especially opinions about grades and grading. I am really looking forward to talking about that 1 week from tonight. Again, it's March 24th, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I really hope you join us. And bring your thoughts, bring your opinions, bring your questions, because I think this one could be an absolute barn burner.